Okay, let's talk about year-round residents. What do we have here year-round? What is this? That's a northern cardinal. That's the male. The female is more brownish in color. What is this? That's a blue jay. Male and female are pretty much the same in these. So these are common birds that are in most people's backyards, and they're here year-round. They breed here, they nest here, they spend the winter here. Sometimes birds like blue jays, you'll get a wintering population that comes from the north that adds to the resident population. So you may have more blue jays here now than you will in the summer, but you'll have at least a few blue jays here year-round. What is this?
Mockingbird?
That's a northern mockingbird, which is our state bird. It's also the state bird of about 6 or 7 other states. Probably there are better choices for our state bird, but that's what the legislature chose, so that's what we're stuck with. It's the bird that will keep you up during the nesting season because it sings 24/7. At 3 o'clock in the morning, it'll be singing right outside your window. So if you ever hear a bird singing outside your window in the middle of the night, it's probably this guy. Okay, this is a relative of the northern mockingbird. This is probably the first one that maybe none of you are familiar with. Anyone know what that is?
Sort of thrush.
It's not a thrush, but close. Begins with.
Thrasher?
It's a thrasher. This is a brown thrasher. Mockingbirds and thrashers are in what is called the mimic thrush family. They sort of look like thrushes. Thrushes are birds like robins. Lots of thrushes are brown with black spots or brown spots on their breast. So it sort of looks like a thrush, but it's actually a thrasher. And these birds will mimic other birds. Mockingbird, obviously, as the name suggests, mimics lots of other birds. This bird here will do some mimicry as well. Anyone know what that is?
Pigeon.
It's in the dove family. That's a mourning dove, which is our most common dove. You can see that right around any residence. Now this is our native dove. This is a dove that's native to South Florida and the Caribbean, and that's the only places that it's found. This is called the white-crowned pigeon. It's a beautiful, beautiful bird. And they nest in mangroves, but they can be found, and they are found in urban areas, so you can have this in your backyard. They oftentimes will perch on phone wires. This beautiful little dove is called a common ground dove. Just a beautiful chestnut color to the wings. This bird is becoming rather scarce in urban areas. My understanding is that in the El Portal area, which is just south of Miami Shores, these birds are starting to show up again. But within Miami, there's very few places where they're found in urban areas. You can find them at places like Bill Baggs Cave Florida State Park on Key Biscayne. They probably used to be on Miami Beach because they like kind of dune-ish areas. But very hard to find the species now in urban Miami, but hopefully they'll come back. Okay, we have several different kinds of woodpeckers. This is our most common woodpecker. This is the red-bellied woodpecker. A lot of people see this woodpecker and they say, oh, it's a red-headed woodpecker because it has a red head. Well, a red-headed woodpecker you can't find in the Miami area. You have to go further north into Florida Peninsula, near Orlando and places like that. This is the red belly. On this particular photo, you can see the red belly, which gets more pronounced on the males during the breeding season. But that's the most common of the backyard woodpeckers. This little guy is a downy woodpecker, which is the smallest of all the woodpeckers in North America, and that can be found in some backyards in Miami. And this is the largest of the woodpeckers that can be found in backyards. This is the pileated or pileated woodpecker. Most people say pileated, a few people say pileated. It's one of those tomato kind of things. You can go either way. But this is a very large woodpecker. Only the ivory-bill woodpecker, which is probably extinct, was larger. Red-winged blackbird. This is the most common bird in North America, but it's getting scarce in urban Miami. When we do Christmas bird counts, sometimes we get very close to not finding any of these at all. But it's a bird that is usually found around wetland areas. There usually are very large flocks of them. And the male has that beautiful red and yellow epaulet on its wings. The female is a drabber bird. Okay, we have lots of blackbirds. This is the common grackle. And we can identify this. It's black, has kind of a purplish sheen to the head, but the yellow eye is the key field mark to identify a common grackle, telling it from the much more common boat-tailed grackle. which doesn't have a yellow eye and has a longer tail. This is the bird that if you're driving on Kendall Drive or lots of city streets in suburban Miami, especially in the early morning or even better in the late afternoon, you'll see these assembling on the wires, especially on intersections, by the thousands. This bird is actually adapted to living in urban areas by picking bugs, dragonflies and things like that, off the grills of cars. So they'll congregate at intersections and they'll wait for the light to change, and then they'll fly down and they'll pick bugs off the grills of cars that are stopped for the light, and then they'll take off with their meal when the light changes. So it's an amazing adaptation that these birds have for living in an urban environment. Now this is a cowbird. This particular cowbird is called a shiny cowbird. The most common cowbird in most of the United States is the brown-headed cowbird, and we do have those here. But this particular cowbird is a shiny cowbird, which is native to the Caribbean, Central America, South America, and it has started breeding here. Cowbirds are nest parasites. They do not build their own nests. Instead, the female will lay its eggs in the nest of another bird, and then that other bird will incubate the eggs and feed the young when they hatch. Usually they'll choose the nest of a bird that is smaller than it, so that the baby cowbird is bigger than the babies of the bird that built the nest, and is probably more likely to be fed by the parent of the bird that built the nest, the parent that built the nest, and is more likely to survive than the actual youngsters of the bird that built the nest. So they are a problem for lots of birds that nest in places where these birds are found. So we have this, the shiny cowbird, and now we're getting another cowbird called the bronze cowbird that is starting to show up in places like Hialeah. And the way that you identify this is by that red eye. The shiny cowbird has a very dark eye, but this one has a red eye. So that's the bronze cowbird, which is native to the southwestern United States, into Mexico, and down into Central America, but it's starting to show up here in Florida, and it's breeding here. Has anyone ever seen this bird? This is not a blackbird. It's black, it's a bird, but it's not a blackbird. This bird is called a smooth-billed ani, and it is a relative of cuckoos and roadrunners. It used to be somewhat common here in Miami, and used to be found in people's backyards. It's also very common throughout the Caribbean and into Central and South America. But for some reason that no one's been able to figure out, this bird has virtually disappeared from Florida. So it's almost assuredly, if it hasn't been already, it's probably in the next year or so, it's going to be extirpated. Extirpated means disappearing from just a portion of its range, rather than going extinct. It's in no danger of going extinct. You go to the Bahamas and they're everywhere there. But for whatever reason, this bird has disappeared. So if you ever see this bird in Florida, you need to go on the Tropical Audubon Bird Board and let us know, because there are lots of people that will want to see this bird. Because I still get emails, and there are still posts on our bird board all the time from visiting birders that say, where can I see this bird? I say, and I mean, it could be pesticides, because this bird actually, its preferred habitat is overgrown weedy places. And you would think there would be no shortage of overgrown weedy places in Miami, especially in the outskirts, in the Redlands and Homestead, and they used to be found there, but for whatever reason, they've disappeared. Pesticides is a very good candidate for what's happened, because they are an insect eater. Okay, this is a loggerhead shrike, sometimes called the butcherbird, and this bird has a better story than the smooth-billed ani. This is a bird that, while it's in trouble in most of its range, it's doing really, really well in Florida, and it's really starting to colonize almost completely urban areas. This is a bird that eats primarily lizards, and what it will do, the reason it's called a butcher bird, is it will impale the lizard. It won't eat it right away. It'll impale it, and basically what it does is it lets it cook under the sun. It barbecues it for a couple of weeks, and then it'll come back, and once it's thoroughly barbecued, then it'll eat it. So that's why it's called the butcher bird. This is a great crested flycatcher. We have lots of different flycatchers that can be found in Florida at different times of the year. This is one of the only ones that breeds here in South Florida. Pretty bird with a yellow belly and rufous wings and tail. This is a Carolina wren. This is a bird that's very common in the Everglades and used to be common in people's backyards in Miami. But for some reason, this one has disappeared as well, and we don't know why. So it's a little, tiny little bird, but a beautiful song that you can hear for a quarter of a mile away. And for whatever reason, I mean, 20 years ago, it used to be a quite common bird in city parks and in people's backyards. It's disappeared. Okay, we have hawks here. And this hawk is the Cooper's hawk, which is in the group of hawks called the accipiters. And this is the most likely hawk that you're going to see year-round in your backyard. This is the bird that terrorizes bird feeders. They're primarily forest birds, and they're designed to travel through the forest. Even if the forest is very dense, the trees are very tightly packed together, this bird can maneuver through it. So it's very well adapted to maneuvering in urban areas between buildings and things like that to get to feeders. So this bird used to be only here in the wintertime, but about 15 years ago it started to nest, and now it's a pretty common nester throughout urban Miami. This is a short-tailed hawk. This is another bird that's become urbanized. This is a bird that is only found in South Florida. The only place in the United States it's found is South Florida. Maybe a few of them in southeastern Arizona. Otherwise, its range extends all the way down through Mexico into Central and South America. But you can see this bird in urban Miami. You very rarely see it like this. Most of the time, you'll see it soaring overhead. Very rarely have people photographed this bird perched. So this photo was taken by a friend of mine, Larry Manfredi, who's a local bird guide here. And this bird comes in two versions, a light morph and a dark morph. This is the light morph. The dark morph is all dark underneath. You may have owls in your backyard, and this would be the most common owl. This is the eastern screech owl. So they like to live in urban areas and places where people that do Christmas bird counts are really dedicated. They'll get up at midnight and they'll go listening for these owls. In the St. Petersburg area, they've actually counted a couple hundred of these. Here in Miami, I haven't found people that are willing to do that, to get up at midnight to go listen for these owls. So we only have usually a handful of these that we find. This is a burrowing owl, and it can be found here in Miami, mostly in airports. They're a bird that burrows underground, and so they like to live in prairie areas, so large open expanses of grasses. Here in Miami, I'm not sure if anybody has these in their backyard. I have found them in schoolyards where there are big PE fields. I've found burrowing owls, but if you go to places like Marco Island, lots of people there have these burrowing owls in their backyard, and they'll put these stakes and some ribbon up to mark them so people don't disturb them. But this has become a backyard bird, and it's a distinct race of this bird that's in Florida. It's also found in the southwestern United States, from Texas to California, and then down into Mexico and through Central and South America. All right, that's it for the birds that are here year-round. Let's talk about spring and summer breeders. There's only a few of those.